Hello, everyone. Today, I will tell you about a case that once shocked Taiwan due to the cruel and barbaric acts of the perpetrator. These heinous actions not only angered and devastated the victim's family, but also left a lasting scar on the collective consciousness of the Taiwanese people at the time. Interestingly, many people even considered the journalists who conducted interviews during that period to be accomplices in the series of crimes that unfolded. Why would they think so? Let's delve into this story and find out. The main character of today's story is Pai Ping-ping, born in 1955, a renowned actress and singer celebrated across Taiwan. In 1975, Pai moved to Japan to pursue her education and career. During her time there, she met a man named Asaki Takamori, born in 1936. Takamori was the author of several famous manga series in Japan, which had a significant impact on Japanese society during that era. In 1978, Pai Ping-ping and Asaki Takamori got married. However, their marriage fell apart when Pai was pregnant with their first child. Takamori failed to fulfill his responsibilities as a husband and father, drowning himself in alcohol day after day. Despite the heartbreak, Pai Ping-ping showed incredible strength by returning to Taiwan and giving birth to her child on her own. On June 23, 1980, she welcomed her precious daughter into the world, naming her Pai Hsiao-yen. Holding her baby girl for the first time brought Pai immeasurable joy. This story is not only about tragedy, but also resilience. Let's explore further to uncover the events that made this case unforgettable in Taiwan's history. Pai Ping-ping deeply loved her daughter, cherishing her like a precious gem and caring for her with the utmost devotion. Under her meticulous upbringing, Hsiao-yen grew up to be a graceful and beautiful young girl. The mother and daughter shared a close bond, often dressing in matching outfits for fun and photo shoots, and even appearing together on television shows. In contrast to her mother's fame, Hsiao-yen embraced a simple and humble lifestyle, always kind and approachable with those around her. Pai Ping-ping instilled in her daughter the values of kindness and virtue, while also teaching her essential self-defense skills to protect herself. The two lived a happy and fulfilling life, with a harmonious balance between career success and family love. However, their joy was shattered when a horrifying nightmare descended upon them, forever separating mother and daughter in life and death. On April 14, 1997, Pai Hsiao-yen was just 17 years old and in her junior year of high school. That morning, she headed to school in high spirits, just like any other day. Her mother, Pai Ping-ping, who was always attentive to her daughter, noticed her cheerful mood and felt reassured by it. However, at around 4 p.m. that afternoon, shortly after performing in a music program, Pai Ping-ping received a call from an unknown number. When she answered, the raspy, slurred voice of a drunken man came through. Fear immediately washed over her face as the man chillingly said, "Your daughter is in our hands." The man demanded that Pai Ping-ping go to a cemetery near the Changgung golf course to retrieve her daughter's belongings. He also made it clear that she was not to contact the police, warning that failure to comply would mean she would never see her daughter again. At this moment, Pai Ping-ping was overwhelmed with fear and worry for her daughter. She immediately complied with the kidnapper's demands and went alone to the Changgung golf course. Amidst the vast expanse of the course and under the dim twilight, she searched desperately for over 4 hours. Her body grew exhausted, and her mind was consumed by anxiety and dread. Then, the terrifying reality revealed itself. Near a tombstone, she spotted a plastic bag containing a lunchbox. With trembling hands, she opened the box to see what was inside. Under the faint light of her flashlight, she glimpsed something small. When she focused the beam directly on the object, she was horrified to discover it was a severed pinky finger alongside nude photographs of her daughter. A wave of panic engulfed her entire being. Struggling to regain composure, she searched the box again and found a handwritten note. The message read, "Mom, I've been kidnapped. I'm in terrible pain. You must save me. They're demanding a ransom of $5 million. It cannot be wired. It must be in cash. And you cannot involve the police, or they will kill me." The sheer terror of the situation left her paralyzed, knowing her daughter's life hung in the balance. After witnessing these unimaginable events, Pai Ping-ping decided not to comply with the kidnapper's demands. Instead, she reported the incident to the police, seeking their help. Upon receiving her report, the police formed an investigative team to look into the case. Based on the information provided by Pai, they attempted to trace the culprits through the phone number used to make the call. However, their efforts were in vain as the kidnappers had used a disposable, untraceable phone. The next day, the kidnappers called again, using a different number, demanding Pai deliver the ransom to secure her daughter's release. She informed the police, who began planning a strategy to apprehend the criminals during the ransom exchange. However, after Pai Ping reported the case to the authorities, news of the incident was leaked to the public. This quickly drew significant media attention. Reporters, unwilling to miss the opportunity to cover a story involving a famous star, flocked to Pai's residence, hoping to interview her about the ordeal. The media sensationalized the case across various platforms. Despite police efforts to chase them away, many reporters remained near Pai's home, determined to extract more explosive details about the story. Their intrusive coverage added further complications to the already tense and delicate situation. The kidnappers quickly learned about the media coverage, which enraged them and led to them changing the ransom drop-off location 7 times. However, each time Pai Ping went to deliver the money, the kidnappers never appeared. They were aware that the case had been exposed and suspected that the police might be lying in wait to ambush them. Eventually, the ransom handover plan completely collapsed. Infuriated, the kidnappers took out their anger on Pai Hsiao-yen's body. They brutally beat, tortured, and sexually assaulted her. To further torment her mother, they called Pai Ping, forcing her to hear her daughter's screams of agony. Their goal was to inflict physical pain on the daughter while mentally tormenting the mother. Faced with the grave danger her daughter was in, Pai Ping held a press conference. She pleaded with reporters to stay away from her family and allow the police to handle the matter effectively. However, after that, the kidnappers never contacted her again. Realizing that it was impossible to catch the culprits during a ransom exchange, the police shifted their strategy. They began focusing on narrowing down potential areas to locate suspects. On April 27th, the police made a televised appeal, urging the kidnappers to surrender and promising leniency under the law. Unfortunately, this plan not only failed, but also led to horrifying news the following day, plunging the case into deeper tragedy. On April 28, 1997, the police station received a call from a local resident reporting the discovery of a woman's body floating in a canal. Forensic investigators arrived promptly at the scene and determined that the victim had died 8 to 10 days earlier. Marks around the neck indicated strangulation. The victim's face had been disfigured, and the location of the body was approximately 12 kilometers from where Pai Hsiao-yen had been abducted. When Pai Ping arrived at the scene, she was overcome with shock and grief as she confirmed that the body was indeed her daughter. The corpse was missing its pinky finger, leaving no doubt about its identity. Investigations revealed that Hsiao-yen had been brutally raped and severely beaten, leading to internal bleeding and her eventual death. What began as a kidnapping for ransom had now escalated into a heinous murder case. Pai Ping was utterly devastated. She wept for days, inconsolable over the loss of her only child, the daughter she had cherished, and the center of her world. Her heartbreak was compounded by the brutal and tragic manner of her daughter's death. Filled with disappointment and anger toward both the police and the media, she accused reporters of indirectly causing her daughter's death by drawing unnecessary attention to the case and interfering with the investigation. This sentiment struck a chord with the Taiwanese public. People across the nation were outraged, not just at the heartless perpetrators, but also at the perceived failures and mishandling of the case by the authorities. The tragedy became a flashpoint, exposing deep dissatisfaction with both the media and the police, and sparking widespread calls for accountability. From May 6th to May 8th, 1997, approximately 100,000 people across Taiwan took to the streets in protest. The demonstrations served both as a way to mourn Pai Hsiao-yen and as a condemnation of the Taiwanese police and government. Protesters criticized their inefficiency, lack of confidentiality, and failure to protect sensitive information, which had been leaked to the press, ultimately leading to Hsiao-yen's tragic death. The incident underscored a broader issue: the inability of the authorities to safeguard women and children. At the time, the perpetrators remained at large, leaving the public in constant fear, uncertain of who might become their next victim. Many people worried that the criminals could strike again, possibly targeting them or their loved ones. As the police urgently investigated suspects, the case continued to dominate public discourse, keeping the nation on edge. On May 3, 1997, a shocking new development emerged. Another gruesome crime was reported. A resident discovered 3 female bodies in a field in central Taiwan. All 3 victims were aged between 18 and 25, and forensic examination revealed that they had been sexually assaulted and died from asphyxiation caused by strangulation. The victims were all residents of Taipei. This new case led the police to conclude that the perpetrators were likely not acting alone, but were instead part of a group, possibly consisting of 3 or more individuals. Recognizing the gravity of the situation, the authorities mobilized all available forces across Taiwan to track down the killers hiding in the shadows. Public fear and anxiety deepened as the search for justice intensified. Based on their experience, the police suspected that after committing their crimes, the perpetrators were likely hiding in mountainous areas or other isolated locations with little foot traffic. However, despite extensive searches in various mountainous regions, they found no leads. After 28 days of tension and anxiety, a breakthrough finally emerged. The police identified their first suspect, Gao Tianming, a 32-year-old man with a criminal record for theft. Using Gao's phone records, investigators discovered he had been in frequent contact with another suspect, Lin Zhongsheng, aged 36. Lin had a history of kidnapping, assault, and sexual violence, and had previously served time in prison alongside Gao. The police continued to analyze the suspect's call logs, which led them to a third suspect, Chen Junqing, a 28-year-old who, like Gao and Lin, had a criminal background and had spent time in jail. Despite these findings, the authorities lacked sufficient evidence to arrest the 3 suspects. When they visited the suspects' homes to gather more information, the parents of each man stated that their sons had left home some time ago and had not returned. These statements deepened the police's suspicions, prompting them to intensify their efforts to locate the 3 individuals. While the police were still searching for the suspects' whereabouts, another report of a kidnapping reached them on June 1st, adding even more urgency to the case. The situation was becoming increasingly dire as the public anxiously awaited justice. This time, the target of the criminals was a businessman named Zhang Gaolang, 48 years old. The kidnappers demanded a ransom of 5 million Taiwanese dollars. However, after the tragic murder of Hsiao-yen, Zhang's family decided to pay the ransom first and report the incident to the police only after Zhang was safely released. Fortunately, Zhang returned unharmed. When police questioned Zhang, he revealed that the kidnappers were 3 men, all of whom had their faces covered, making it impossible for him to identify them. This corroborated the police's theory that the crimes were committed by the 3 suspects they had previously identified. As a series of high-profile crimes unfolded, fear gripped the people of Taiwan. Many avoided venturing out, especially in deserted areas. While the entire island was on high alert and determined to track down the culprits, a crucial report was sent to the police, which ultimately led to the capture of the criminals. On June 20th, a patrolling police officer noticed a suspicious individual and began following him. The suspect fled into a residential house. When the officer attempted to enter, the suspect fired a gun at him before escaping. Fortunately, the bullet only grazed the officer's abdomen, causing no life-threatening injuries. Realizing the house could be a hideout for the criminals, the officer called for backup from nearby patrol units. Upon entering the house, they discovered 3 women tied up inside. Thankfully, the officer's quick response had prevented further harm to the women. The victims were immediately rescued, and when shown images of the 3 suspects, they confirmed that one of their captors strongly resembled Chen Junqing. This critical identification brought the investigation closer to its conclusion. The police realized that the perpetrators behind the string of crimes were Gao Tianming, Lin Zhongsheng, and Chen Junqing, and their hideout was not in the mountains or remote areas, as initially suspected, but in Taipei, a densely populated urban area. The authorities concentrated their full efforts on the Taipei region, which eventually led to a breakthrough. On July 19th, the police received a tip from a boat operator. He reported that 3 individuals had paid him 1 million Taiwanese dollars to transport them to mainland China. However, their behavior raised his suspicions, and he believed they might be the perpetrators of the recent crimes. Fearing for his safety, he hid and immediately reported the incident to the police. Acting on this information, the investigation unit dispatched 2 nearby officers to the scene to investigate. When the officers arrived and began to approach the boat, the 3 suspects quickly drew their firearms and opened fire. Both officers were hit, collapsing to the ground. One officer died on the spot, while the other was critically injured. This violent confrontation further confirmed the dangerous and ruthless nature of the criminals, heightening the urgency to capture them before they could escape or harm others. The injured officer recognized the 3 suspects as Gao Tianming, Lin Zhongsheng, and Chen Junqing, the men being actively pursued by the authorities. Quickly, the officer called for backup, and a large contingent of police and a special task force arrived at the scene. Armed with shields and bulletproof vests, they surrounded the entire Wuchang district in Taipei, blocking all roads to meticulously check everyone passing through. Realizing the heavy police presence, the 3 killers decided to split up and flee. However, the police soon spotted Gao Tianming entering an alley. When cornered, Gao opened fire in a desperate attempt to resist arrest. Recognizing the threat posed by his violent resistance, the special task force responded with gunfire, fatally shooting Gao. He was struck 6 times in the chest and died on the spot. Meanwhile, over 800 officers were deployed to search every house in the surrounding area to prevent the other 2 suspects from escaping. However, the situation was complicated by the presence of numerous reporters at the scene. Some journalists infiltrated the police lines and mingled with the crowd of onlookers, further disrupting the evacuation efforts. Amidst the ensuing chaos, the remaining 2 suspects, Lin Zhongsheng and Chen Junqing, exploited the confusion to successfully escape. Their ability to evade capture deepened public frustration and reignited anger toward the media's interference in such a critical operation. After escaping the police dragnet, Chen Junqing and Lin Zhongsheng realized that it would be difficult to remain unnoticed with their current appearances. They began planning to alter their looks in a desperate bid to evade capture. On October 23rd, at around 5 p.m., Chen and Lin entered a cosmetic surgery clinic in Taipei. Armed with guns, they forced the doctor to perform plastic surgery on them, one at a time. Lin was the first to undergo the procedure, while Chen held the staff at gunpoint. The clinic was staffed by 3 individuals, the clinic owner and their spouse, along with a young assistant. After partially altering Lin's appearance, the 2 criminals turned their attention to the young assistant, consumed by lust. They immediately shot the clinic owners, killing them on the spot, and proceeded to assault the assistant. When she screamed for help, they killed her as well, continuing to desecrate her body afterward. Only Lin managed to alter his face before the 2 fled the scene. Later that evening, a cleaning staff member arrived at the clinic and discovered the bodies of the 3 victims. She immediately called the police. Upon investigation, forensic experts confirmed that the assistant had been sexually assaulted, as traces of semen were found on her body. The investigative team deduced that the perpetrators targeted a cosmetic surgery clinic to alter their faces, making them unrecognizable and facilitating their escape across the border. To cover their tracks, they killed the medical staff to eliminate any witnesses. The police intensified their pursuit of the 2 fugitives, knowing that their continued freedom would inevitably lead to more innocent lives being lost. Authorities issued a nationwide alert detailing the suspects' actions and their altered appearances, urging citizens to remain vigilant for their own safety and that of their families. The gruesome murders at the clinic further fueled public outrage and fear, heightening the urgency to capture the criminals before they could strike again. After undergoing cosmetic surgery, Lin Zhongsheng believed that neither the police nor the public would be able to recognize him anymore. This overconfidence led him to let down his guard and begin venturing outside to observe the situation. However, his complacency came at the ultimate cost: his life. On November 2nd, Lin boarded a high-speed train heading to a location in Taipei to purchase supplies. Unbeknownst to him, a vigilant citizen recognized him and discreetly reported his whereabouts to the police. Law enforcement quickly arrived at the specified location and confirmed that the individual was indeed Lin Zhongsheng. They moved swiftly to apprehend the dangerous suspect. Realizing the police presence at the supermarket where he had stopped, Lin panicked and took a young woman hostage in an attempt to escape. However, he soon realized that the police had surrounded the entire supermarket, leaving him with no way out. Cornered and desperate, Lin chose to end his life, using the gun in his hand to commit suicide. When Chen Junqing learned of his two accomplices' deaths, he understood that his chances of escaping were now slim. Resigned to his fate but still driven by twisted impulses, Chen began planning for one final act of depravity, seeking a fleeting sense of gratification before his inevitable capture. On the morning of November 5th, Chen Junqing broke into a residential home with malicious intent toward two sisters living there. However, a neighbor noticed the suspicious activity and alerted the police. The investigation team quickly surrounded the entire area. Realizing he was cornered, Chen took one of the sisters hostage in an attempt to escape. With a hostage in the hands of a dangerous murderer, the police could only follow him from a safe distance, complying with his demands to avoid endangering her life. By nightfall, Chen grew tired and recognized that his chances of escape were dwindling. At 7 p.m., he made one last desperate move, breaking into the home of military officer Zhuo Maoki. Inside, Chen took Zhuo's entire family of 5 hostage, binding them along with the young woman he had already abducted earlier. A large contingent of police officers, along with media crews, quickly arrived at the scene. Snipers were positioned at a distance, while heavily armed units prepared to storm the house if necessary. However, fearing for the safety of the hostages, the authorities opted to first establish contact with Chen. The police began negotiating with Chen, urging him to surrender peacefully in hopes of resolving the crisis without further bloodshed. The tense standoff placed immense pressure on the police as they worked to protect the lives of the 6 hostages inside. At Chen Junqing's request, the police brought his wife, Zhang Suqing, to the scene to speak with him. After nearly 25 hours of negotiations, Chen began releasing the hostages one by one, ultimately surrendering to the authorities. Following his arrest, DNA evidence was used to confirm Chen's involvement in multiple crimes. It was revealed that during his time on the run, he had committed 19 rapes, with victims ranging from 13 to 60 years old. However, Chen admitted to assaulting at least 50 women, many of whom were too terrified to come forward due to threats from him and his accomplices. During interrogations, Chen confessed to the kidnapping, extortion, and murder of Pai Hsiao-yen, the daughter of the prominent Taiwanese actress Pai Ping-ping. He also admitted to being one of the perpetrators responsible for the murders of 3 women in a field and 3 victims at the cosmetic clinic. Chen explained that initially, their intent was to make a large sum of money through ransom. However, after realizing the media's extensive coverage of their crimes, they understood they could never safely claim the money. In response, they decided to kill their victims to eliminate any evidence. Knowing they had crossed a point of no return, especially given that their victim was the daughter of a well-connected celebrity, the group grew increasingly reckless. They resorted to a spree of violence, targeting women for fleeting gratification, leaving a devastating trail of destruction in their wake. Chen's actions, along with those of his accomplices, caused profound sorrow across Taiwan. Families mourned the senseless loss of their loved ones, and the nation grappled with the shock and grief brought about by these heinous crimes. The case exposed not only the brutality of the perpetrators, but also the profound trauma experienced by their victims and their families. In total, the group was responsible for the murders of 7 victims and 1 police officer. Ultimately, Chen Junqing, the last surviving member of the cold-blooded killers, was sentenced by the Supreme Court to 8 death penalties. Although the perpetrators were brought to justice, the pain and scars left by their crimes would forever remain with the victims' families. After Chen Junqing's confession was made public, a protest of 50,000 people erupted, holding Taiwanese President Lee Teng-hui accountable. The public demanded answers, questioning why the police had failed to intervene in time and why politicians had not taken stronger measures to crack down on crime. Protesters also blamed the media for indirectly contributing to the tragic outcomes by sensationalizing the case, which they argued gave the criminals reasons to kill their victims. It was widely acknowledged that from the very beginning, Taiwanese journalists and television networks violated standard practices by reporting extensively on the kidnapping before the police had formulated a proper response. This premature and intrusive coverage not only compromised the investigation, but also escalated the situation, leading to catastrophic consequences. The case became a painful lesson for Taiwan, highlighting the devastating impact of unchecked media interference, systemic failures, and the far-reaching consequences of crime. It also sparked widespread calls for reforms in law enforcement and media ethics to prevent such tragedies from recurring. A sign reading "Journalists are guilty" was hung near Pai Pingping's home. Wu Shou-liu, a senior journalist overseeing the coverage of the story for the China Times, admitted that some reporters had overstepped their boundaries. In the aftermath, President Lee Teng-hui took responsibility for failing to resolve the kidnapping before Pai Hsiao-yen was murdered. Dear friends, Pai Hsiao-yen, the daughter of Pai Pingping, was an outstanding student and an exceptional public speaker. She had plans to study journalism. Although her death remains a tragedy that deeply grieves the people of Taiwan, it cannot compare to the immeasurable sorrow of a mother who has lost her only child. In fact, there have been many ransom cases like this, with repeated warnings against involving the police. In Pai Pingping's case, the decision to report the kidnapping led to media leaks, which ultimately cost Pai Hsiao-yen her life. This raises a critical question. Should one notify the police in such situations, or attempt to handle it privately? Thank you for watching, and I invite you to share your thoughts.